I am very happy to demonstrate for you now how to create your own vSphere 6 lab. Specifically, you'll be downloading all the 3 pieces of code you need. You got your hypervisor here, you got your vSphere client here, a Windows installer, and then finally you have this large ISO. That's the vCSA appliance, or vCenter server appliance. Those 3 pieces are what make up your vSphere 6 home lab, coupled with, in my case, a Core i7 server with 32 gig of RAM. Now you can get started with downloading these 3 files. And of course, my article has the links and how to get those 3 files. And we're also going to need a tool called Rufus at this URL. On my site, tinkertry.com, I also have an article that walks you through Rufus, but I'm going to show you right now what to do. Rufus is going to create the bootable media on a USB flash drive that's going to become where we install ESXi 2. I'm going to download Rufus 2.1 Portable. I'm going to save it right where we have these other files. So in this particular fresh Windows 8.1 system, I made a directory called vSphere 6.0.0. So we now have Rufus downloaded. Another tool that's going to be very handy for the process of installing and configuring your vSphere 6 data center will be PuTTY. It's been around for well over a decade at that same URL. So all we really need is PuTTY, and all we need is a Windows version as an EXE. No install needed. And I saved that to the same folder. Keeping this video as simple as possible and uncluttered as possible, I'm now done with the browser. What is next? Running Rufus. Say yes to user access control, and say no, I don't need it to check for application updates every time we launch it. Okay, this is the simple Rufus user interface. Now, a couple things to point out. 1, we haven't told it what ISO to stick on a USB flash drive. And 2, we haven't even stuck in a USB flash drive. So in my case, I'm sticking in a SanDisk USB 3.0 16 gig drive for all of $10 on Amazon. Inserting it now. So now that it sees a 16 gig drive, we're ready to point to the ISO file. So let me point out, right here is the button we need. Click to select an image, and it's the hypervisor, this one that we want, the smaller ISO file. Okay, the settings in this screen are important. MBR partition scheme for BIOS UEFI computers, we're going to leave that alone. FAT, cluster size, all the rest should look like this on your screen before you click the Start button. Now, the very first time you run Rufus, it needs to download another piece from the internet. So another file is going to go right into that directory at the bottom. And then it's warning me it's going to obliterate, nuke, destroy all the contents of this USB flash drive. So make sure you know what you're doing. Okay, now we just wait for it to complete. And there you have it. It finished in all of 22 seconds. Right there. We're done with Rufus. So I'm going to close the Rufus UI. It's always wise to properly eject the media. Now I'm ready to power up the server with a USB flash drive in place. And in my case, with ESXi 6, we don't really get the USB 3 speeds for the hypervisor itself. So you could really pick a USB 2 slot or USB 2 socket on your motherboard. So I'm ready to proceed. The USB flash drive is in the server, and I've powered on the server now. And what you're looking at, you can think of as like a video camera aimed at the server screen. It's called Keyboard Video Mouse over IP. And it's going to let me show you my machine powering on. So in my case, I'm going to hit delete to get into setup. So in my particular motherboard, that's the hotkey to hit to get into the setup routine. Again, I want to point out here, the local VGA, keyboard video mouse, KVM, is almost useless after you install the hypervisor. You don't run Windows or any operating system from the locally attached keyboard video mouse on your hypervisor, your ESXi server. It's largely meant to be headless. So I just want to point that out. And again, think of this window, this Lantronix KVM console, as a camcorder aimed at the monitor of the ESXi host. All right, good way to think of it. Now, what do we have here? Well, like I said, it's a Core i7, and I want to show you the settings that are pertinent or could be pertinent on your motherboard. They're going to obviously look different. You're going to find things in different places. But under CPU configuration, in general, you're going to want Intel virtualization technology turned on and no execute memory protection enabled. Especially that second one. If you don't have that on, it won't even let you install. Okay? Just pointing that out. So in my case, those were on already. Hyperthreading on as well. I'm going to go right over to storage. That's the next piece that's relevant. And it says USB SanDisk right at the top of my boot list. So I already have USB at the top of the boot list, and that's it. I can disable that. So one item. I don't want to boot off of any hard drives. I just want to boot off the USB flash drive I inserted. Okay? As far as USB, you may need to go to legacy mode or boot from legacy mode. So again, way out of scope to try to cover every possible motherboard option out there. So I'm going to go ahead and save changes and exit and show you how straightforward installing ESXi 6.0 is. Configuring takes longer, but the actual installation is very straightforward. Okay, I sped up that segment of video a bit, and now I'm ready to simply hit enter. And F11 to accept and continue. Now it's scanning for potential install targets or local drives. And the one that's highlighted in yellow is the SanDisk UltraFit that we just booted from. And that's definitely where I want to install. I don't want to go putting on one of those SSDs you see there listed, or my RAID array. So I simply hit enter to confirm the one it chose. You want to be very careful in that step. It's warning me it's about to overwrite all data on that device. I hit enter again. US keyboard in my case. I'm using password with a capital P and 0 instead of an O in the word, and an exclamation at the end. That makes it happy. ESXi doesn't care so much, but coming up with the vCSA appliance, it wants a complex password, so we can use that universally throughout this home lab installation I'll be showing you. Ready to hit enter. And one last confirmation telling me that this disk will be repartitioned. Hit F11 and then just wait. Okay, on this screen it thinks you're usually using an ISO burned to a CD or DVD. Well, that's not us. We actually leave our media inserted. This is an extra nice piece of using a flash drive. You don't have to worry about a DVD or CD ejecting out the front of your server or hitting a closed door or whatnot. So I hit enter and it starts rebooting. I'll go ahead and speed this section up again. Excellent. Now I'm ready to configure the hypervisor. So you can see the version shown at the top, the processor, but I want to bring your attention to the bottom left corner, hitting F2 to customize. It then prompts me to type in the password that we chose earlier. And I'm now in. Down arrow to configure management network. That's what I want to do. It lets me list all network adapters it found. I'll stick with the one VMNIC0 that it's found first. And just down arrow my way to IPv4 and hit enter again. Instead of dynamic, I'm going to go with static like you usually do for a server. And before I choose 50, I'm going to show you, or remind you, that always a good idea to ping first. Make sure that IP address really is available. Okay. Subnet mask and gateway look good as is, because DHCP is where it got those guesses from. Simply hit enter. How about DNS? Let's head on there. And notice it hard-coded that. And again, it's guessing based on what the DHCP server gave it before. But I do want to change the host name. And finally, domain name suffix. I don't like that one so much. So I'm going to call it .lab.local. That's important to note. .local alone can get some trouble with Apple devices on the network. Bonjour. So I'm going to stick with .lab.local. So my machine's called ESXi, not 55 or 60 or any of that, because I want to be able to upgrade it, right? So ESXi is the name of my server. .lab.local is the full name. I'm going to hit escape at this point. And it's going to say, do you want to apply the changes? I say Y for yes. Wait a moment. Okay, now I want to test. So I'm going to down arrow twice. And go to Test Management Network. And simply hit enter. All right, so naturally, if you don't have full forward and reverse lookup, fully qualified domains in your home lab, which is pretty typical for a home router, you're going to get an error when it tries to do the full host name. That's okay. So this hypervisor is now ready. Now, do you remember I mentioned it's largely headless? So that's really it for the local console. Just get that out of our way. And we did download PuTTY, you might remember. So I'm going to launch PuTTY at this time. Now, how will PuTTY see this hypervisor? Well, let's teach it the host name. So again, I don't want to assume anything about your Wi-Fi router that you have in your home. Right-click here, Windows 8.1. Command prompt is admin. Say yes. I'm going to back up the host file first. Now I'm going to edit it. Okay, while we're in there, we're going to do another line that looks like that for vCenter that we're about to do next. So now when we ping ESXi, we see a return for the IP address we set. We're done with that command prompt window. So we can save a session, and now we can just, next time we run it, just click on ESXi. So network connection refused. That's expected. Why is that? Well, we need to install VMware VI Client 2C. Now, if you forgot to download that, you're offered that here as well. Let me show you. Download vSphere client for Windows. Notice the bottom left corner, the URL. It's the same code I've already downloaded. VI client all 6060 EXE. So different file name when it comes inside the bundle versus downloaded from the site, but the size is the same, and doing a file compare, it's the same. So I'm going to just double click the VI client and now install that and wait for it. This is how we're going to log into the hypervisor that we just created and check in that things look good. You won't be using it much longer. This is 6.0. Maybe by 6.1 you won't need it at all, really. I like to just double check the health of the hypervisor before I move on to the server appliance. If you've never done this before, I'll just point out that the VMware VI client we're doing, this Windows installer, it's what goes back for many years. So sysadmins that have been playing with VMware for a long time will know this user interface. The web interface, though, is the way things are moving forward. I'm going to be showing you that coming up after we get the appliance installed. So I'm going to pick English. Next. Accept. Next. Default directory is fine. Next. And install. And simply wait. I'll speed this up. Okay, that's done. We can click Finish. And I usually right click and pin it to my taskbar right there. And I can delete the desktop icon. Alright, so we're ready to launch. Install the certificate and do not display a warning. Click OK and ignore. So the next time it won't have that pop up. And wait for a login to happen. And we're in. We have 60 days in this trial. Now, what's next? Why am I in here? Click on inventory, and now you see this thing called an ESXi host that we created, and there's the fully qualified name there. Because the DHCP server is feeding it ri.cox.net, that's what it keeps doing, but we can clean that up in a minute. Next thing I'm going to do is get SSH working. How do we do that? I'm going to go to this Configuration tab, Security Profile, Properties, SSH, Options, start it, and then for the next time around, after a reboot, start and stop with host, which means server. Click OK, and click OK. So you may remember the reason I wanted to do this, because PuTTY wasn't working, right? So now let's try PuTTY again. So I'm going to fire up PuTTY again. This time we should be able to get into the ESXi host. Say yes. There is no nano, excuse me. You have to use VI. Or you could use something like MinSCP if you really, really want a GUI. Alright. Notice it went and named it, ignoring me saying lab.local. It went and named it what my home Wi-Fi router insists on sending out as a fully qualified name. Let's compare. DNS is really important in vSphere 6. Properties. So what it's done is put it in an order that we don't really like necessarily. And up here, did the same thing. So let's clean that up. It's warning me about IPv6, which I'm not worried about or really doing anything with. All right, now we've got a proper name. Now let's see what changed over here. So in VI, what do you do when you want to get out? You hit escape, you hit colon, and quit. So now if we type cat hosts, we can see the contents. Notice the new contents. I didn't do right quit, I just did a quit. So we're configured the way we wanted. ESXi.lab.local, also known as ESXi. So the host is done. But you know what? We're here and we've got the ability to add vCenter as well. Again, I'm in a home lab. I don't really want to necessarily have a full Active Directory or Windows Server running just to run domain name services with forward and reverse lookup. You can just tweak host files, as you've seen me do before in my ESXi 5.5 video. So I've opened VI, I move my arrow around. When we get to the end, you want to hit the insert key. Now I can move right arrow and get to the end of the last text that's there. Hit enter and start typing. Tab, space, enter. Okay. Escape, colon, WQ. And then cat host, and you'll see we successfully made the changes and they stuck. They've been saved. This is good. What's next? Back over here. Couple things. You're going to get warnings about leaving PuTTY running. You get this yellow bar, it'll show up in your face, it'll annoy you. So I'm going to jump right to advanced settings. Just trying to give you a little spit and polish. And go to user vars and scroll to the bottom. And suppress shell warnings. Change that to a 1 and click OK. That's done. Next, time. Time configuration right here. Properties. All right. It looks like the clock is awfully close. But still, I'm going to enable NTP. Click on Options. NTP Settings. Add. Or you could use like your local internet provider's NTP source if you want. Click OK. Restart NTP to apply this change we just made. Click OK again. You can see stuff happening at the bottom. Now what happens? Well, we want to go back into options to see. It says running. Yeah, that's nice. But what about after restarting the host? So we want to start and stop with the host. And then click OK. So you want to be very careful, get your NTP right. This is our NTP server. It's going to be our NTP server for our vCSA appliance coming up too. So now we know we have a good clock with correct time. I see a bit of drift here. So that should be resolved soon. I'm ready to move on to the next piece. I'm going to make Chrome my default. course, you can use Firefox as well, but Chrome has a handy application pinning option that I'm going to show you that really comes in handy later on with the vSphere client. All right, so Chrome is there partly to help us get ready for the next steps, which involve deploying the appliance. Now, one of the prerequisites for the appliance is browser integration. So let me show you. Remember we started with 3 files? Here's the giant one. If you're on Windows 8.1 or 8, you can simply double click on ISO and it's going to mount the drive letter and just show you the contents. It's that easy. Suddenly we have a drive E here and we have contents. We have a README that tells us the folder layout. Let me show you what's inside here. Client integration plugin. You need that before the browsers will know what to do with the installer we're about to run. So this is a prerequisite. What we're doing here is now jumping to getting ready for a web client to function. So this equips our installed browsers with the ability to run our vSphere data center, basically, our home lab. Up a level, and we have this thing called vCSA setup.html. When we click on vCSA setup.html, it's going to say what application you want to use for HTML in the future. We'll say Chrome. And there it is. Step 1, it says, please install the client. We did already. So that means this next thing's going to pop up just this one time. Remember my choice and launch the application. And now we have an install wizard. So this is a new approach. If you're used to ESXi 5.5 or earlier, installing this vCSA appliance was a very different procedure. It's now this web-based procedure. Click Install. Accept the terms of the license agreement and click Next. ESXi, root, and the password we set up earlier. So it's saying connect to target server. We're giving it what it wants, those parameters. Click Next. And for the certificate, warning, just say yes. Next screen, item 3, set up a virtual machine. This is an arbitrary name. It's the name it's going to be in inventory. It's generally something like vCenter. So this appliance, this first virtual machine in our new data center is going to be called vCenter. I went with the same password as I used for the ESXi host. Not a great idea to do in production, or this is a lab. But everything will function fine. Okay, platform services. Do you need to know about this? Not really. If you're new to this, you can just hit Next. You're getting everything embedded. We're not pointing to some external one, which would be more complicated. We're going to create a new SSO domain, which is single sign-on. And we can use the same password now a third time, if we'd like. SSO domain name, what is this? You can just type the sample one. The suggestion. Try and keep this video simple. Just type what it says there. It's fine. You're not going to have multiple ones in your home lab, likely. Appliance size, I'm going to leave this alone. 100 VMs is a huge number to have in a home lab, so keeping it light in the memory footprint, it's going to choose 8. You can strip it down to 6 safely later on for how much memory this appliance will use from your hopefully fairly beefy Core i7. Maybe 16 gig of RAM would be a good starting point on maybe a Mac Mini or something, but lower than that, Yeah, you're going to be hurting because this appliance is going to take 6 gig minimum. Okay, next, a data store. Now, I want to point out, if you get to this step and you've never installed VMware before, you're not going to see anything here. So here's the fix. Remember this vSphere client? I'm trying not to show you too much in there because you don't need it much anymore, but you may need to go to storage and click on add storage and next, and it'll find a drive if you have one installed, like an SSD, a blank one ideally, or blank, I don't know, 6 terabyte hard drive. And you click on it and say next, and it'll say, hey, do you want to let me format it and lose all the contents on it as VMFS file system, it's called. Just like you have NTFS for your Windows box. You say yes, and give it a name, and you're done. So that's the wizard. I don't have any blank desks at the moment, so I'm sorry, I'm not showing you that. But there's plenty of documentation on that. Adding storage. So in my case, I already have storage. I'm good to go. So back to this web wizard. I'm going to pick my fastest for the appliance. The appliance is used for all sysadmin. And that's what I do a lot of in my home lab. So I want it to be fast. I'm putting on a SATA 3 connected newer SSD of mine that has 81 gig available, which is more than enough. I'm also going to make sure I turn on enable thin disk mode. That'll make it so this VM only uses up as much space as it really needs. That's really important to do on an SSD. I believe it was under 20 gig. I think it's even under 10 gig. It doesn't use much by default. Now we click next. Embedded database is fine. Next. Okay. And here we have to pause and really think for a bit. Okay, I need to trick my home router to cooperating. So this chapter, I might come up with a better, more elegant way later on. We could do scripted installs, but I think most people really kind of want to see how do you do a quick install or next install. So vast majority of the videos and screenshots I've seen out there say, hey, they just chicken out in a home lab, they just type in a hard-coded IP address. I don't want to do that. I want my appliance called vCenter. So how am I going to do that? Well, follow along here. Keep it a little simple. I'll use Internet Explorer to log into my home router. And my home router has a feature I need to do this successfully. You may have a different story. You may have a different kind of DHCP server or home router. But the capability we're looking at is a DHCP reservation table. We're going to want to give a name. When DHCP asks for a certain MAC address, we're going to want to give it the name vCenter. So this appliance is very picky. This wizard we're going through, this line right here, they're not kidding. Having this working is essential. It's going to be issuing certificates, doing all kinds of stuff. You want to have the IP address and host name fully qualified and all worked out in advance. So that's what we're doing. We're going to our home consumery Wi-Fi router. Remember that fully qualified domain name stuff where it said cox.net? It kept insisting on that. I can fix that. I got to find out what my current IP is. Report. There. Now I have all my internet settings. Grab a quick screenshot of that. So what I'm going to do is temporarily hard code the WAN interface of my home router. Why the heck would I do that? I'll let you start to become clear as I get further along. So I'm going to go back to connectivity, internet settings, edit, and change it to a static IP on the WAN interface. Can't leave it like this, it's not a great idea, but what it does is it gets this out of being gray. And it lets me get this appliance installed. It's kind of a hack, but it works. Many brands of routers can support this. So I wish I came up with a DHCP server, like a piece of freeware you could download for Windows and would have the same functionality. I couldn't find one. So finally, I'm making this video hours before I'm flying away, actually. That's why it's wicked late, and I want to leave my lab in a good state before I go on a trip here. So I'm ready to go to subnet mask. Okay, so now when DHCP grants leases to local devices, they don't get that weird fully qualified domain name. Important for the appliance. Didn't really matter for the ESXi host because I show you how to fix it. But for this vCSA appliance, everything's now going to work, which is cool. So we're waiting for the router to become responsive again. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is get that out of our way and deploy this appliance and see if we can sneak in quick enough to get a MAC address reservation going. We may have to deploy the appliance again if we don't. That's okay. Doesn't really take that long, especially on an SSD. In my case, DHCP. I'm going to leave this blank because the DHCP server is going to feed that out to it. I'm going to synchronize, since we have our ESXi server with a proper clock, I'm going to synchronize this virtual machine, this appliance, to it. And finally, enabling SSH is very handy. You saw me and why that's useful earlier. Here it warns me about DHCP. Okay, I'm hitting finish. Now the wizard's running. Okay, over here we can bring this, hit Windows plus right arrow key, size that to half of the screen, and you're going to see a virtual machine has shown up. Go to summary, and it's not running yet. It's powered off. So all this is important. What I want to be ready to do is click on Edit Settings when it starts powering up and make a DHCP reservation at that point. All we need to do is paste in the MAC address as soon as we know it. So when this shows powered on, that means the VM is done being provisioned. Down here you can see status of that. And there you go, it's powered on now. So I hit Edit Settings, highlight the network adapter, and then just start typing the MAC address. Save it. And the router is now feeding out that MAC address. Cancel this, I didn't change anything. As the console boots on this appliance we just created, if I hit escape, you can look under the hood of it. You don't have to, a little scary under there, but you can if you want. When it comes up further and it's further along in the boot, it'll show the IP address here. Interesting, it still shows .ri.cox.net there. It's a little odd. And we got the wrong IP. Not the friendliest thing to do, but I'm powering it off because I couldn't reliably come up with a way to show you any other procedure that would work every time. So forcibly power it off, right click, delete from disk. Otherwise you try to deploy it again, it says it already exists. So the wizard on the left is now going to be toast, and we just do it again. Okay, what you're seeing here on the right is the correct IP address, .51, and the fully qualified name, vcenter.lab.local. So basically that was our goal, to get it to look like that. The appliance now is configured correctly, and its certificates and all its built-in stuff it's doing, actually I can show you in the console here, will all be nice and proper. Normally this is hidden from you unless you hit escape. So the sequence will be, let's tweak the host file of the vCenter appliance. We can add the ESXi host to its inventory, and then we'll say, hey ESXi, if you were to reboot, make sure you restart this vCenter appliance automatically. And then I'll go ahead and reboot. And I want to make sure that DNS and the user interface and everything looks clean after that reboot. Then I'll have that confidence that this lab I'm beginning to build here is in good shape. I temporarily set up my Wi-Fi router so it would be a DHCP server that would feed out a fully qualified name. Those are all important steps. I'll be leaving the DHCP reservation there, but I will be removing that hard-coded manual IP address on the WAN interface. I doubt Cox Internet would like that, and I've noticed it disables it after a few hours, so I do not want to leave the internet like that. It needs to be DHCP on the WAN interface for most people's cable modem situations in a residential setting. Excellent. Success. Now remember I said I want to test login, but before that I want to get my router back and my home back to normal. So internet settings, type of internet connection, back on automatic, click apply, and let that thing reboot or restart or do whatever it's doing. Put this in your clipboard, administrator vSphere local. Copy, and then click the link to open. Okay, bypass the warning about the certificate. Proceed. And right click, paste. See that much less typing. And you can use LastPass or something to auto-populate that for you if you feel like it later. Click login. We're now about to see the function of this appliance for the first time. It seems to be behaving normally. I don't want to forget the host file, so let's go ahead and handle that. Actually, we are done with this, right? We're done with the whole install. So one good thing to keep in mind is to eject media when you're done with them, right? So you don't really need that drive E mounted anymore, that big ISO mounted. We don't need that window open anymore either. And internet connection DHCP, yep, we don't need that open anymore either. It's healthy and rebooted. What do we need? PuTTY. So we have that PuTTY session open. We can right click and let's set up another one. Save it. Now just double click it. Yes. All right. So we can do a side-by-side comparison, right? There's cat of hosts. We're trying to do that on the right. But before we can do that, it's making us type some stuff to get to a bash shell. So I have to type this. And there's a permanent fix so that you don't have to do this every time. If that interests you, I'll follow up with some of that spit and polish at a later time. Okay. Launch bash shell is simply by typing, there you go. Okay, you can see my hosts file is lacking. Let's fix it, but it does look good from a fully qualified name perspective. VI hosts, nice. So remember what we do. We move the cursor to where we're going to be adding stuff. Hit insert. Move to the right one. Now I can hit enter. 10.10.1.50. Tab. How about 2 spaces? There we go. ESXi.lab.local. ESXi. And then I move to the end. I hit enter. I want to have, and taking a careful look. Does it look exactly like on the left for those 2 lines? Other than ESXi seems to use tab for a delimiter, and the appliance seemed to use 2 spaces for the delimiter. Whatever. It's the same host file. The 2 lines I care about are 50 and 51. So it looks done to me. So I hit escape. I hit colon. I hit WQ. And then I cat it. And now I've got a side-by-side where things look good. Okay, the host file set. The router is back to normal. We have a working vSphere web client. It's time to show you how to configure the host. And the very first step, notice where I was, the vSphere web client, you can't see the host. You can't see the server. All you have is this thing, this vCenter.lab.local appliance that says, hey, click here to create a data center. So let's do that. Now that we've gotten one of those, we click on it, and you typically might have your location, like for me, Connecticut or something. Okay, add host. That sounds promising. Go past the licensing, lockdown mode, go past. VM location, just the next install. So we edited the host file so that the vCSA appliance would know how to find the ESXi host by name rather than ugly IP address. So now we have a UI that looks exactly how I wanted my home lab to look. It was pretty easy to do this in 5.5. They made it way harder in 6.0. I don't have to reissue certificates. I don't have to do anything sloppy. Third-party backup software and whatnot shouldn't have any problems with this. I wouldn't recommend it for production, what we've done here, but we're good to go. We're going to have a library of virtual machines now. We've got an ESXi host, and I told you before forgetting, to make sure I wouldn't forget, I want to reboot. Make sure everything comes up clean. So we go to the ESXi host, click on Manage, and right here, VM startup and shutdown sounds really promising to me. Click Edit. Automatically start and stop the virtual machines with the system. Yes. Home lab, 15 seconds, plenty. Most of my VMs, that's fine. And shutdown. So if I have like 10 VMs, I don't really want to wait around 20, 30 minutes in a home environment. Also, when they start up, if VMware Tools loads, why not just load the next VM? Why wait? Okay. Shutdown action, very important. By default, it'll just abruptly pull the power cord on your VMs. I don't like that very much. I want it to do a graceful shutdown, guest shutdown. And then finally, vCenter. Highlight it, hit the up arrow, and now it's in the automatic startup group. And I'm going to click OK. Right-click on the host. Power. Reboot. So you may remember we have this ability to watch even a reboot. And if we look at the bottom here, I'll bring that up later when it's actually rebooting. I'm going to put this in the right. I'm going to put this on the left. You'll see something's happening with the UI. There you go. It's shutting down. It says initiate guest shutdown of the vCenter appliance. Okay. And then so on the right, the web client has probably become unresponsive. Yep. And then now it's rebooting. It's not the cleanest. VMware's done that for years. When it dies like that, you get some weird errors. All right. Video went blank. And ESXi is now going to come back up. So, some things to point out. We have not tested moving files in and out of data stores on hosts. That would be important to make sure our web is working, our web client. And we also haven't created a shortcut for the web client. So, I'll show you that. A shortcut being a way the web browser doesn't waste space with this URL line. It'll look like an application rather than a web browser. And that's what we want for a dedicated, green button that'll sit here in the tray. We want to be able to start the vSphere web client nice and easily. Certainly done with that tab. That worked. Done with that tab too. And this is going to be a bad login at this point. We can close that as well. And we're actually done with VMware vSphere client. We don't need this UI anymore for much of anything unless you really want to use it. I will point out that you can log into the vCenter appliance we just created with this vSphere client. But with version 6.1 or some later version, they've been threatening it for years. You probably won't be able to anymore. They really are trying to push hard towards the web client. Rebooting does take a while. I'm going to take a little break, but it tends to take 5, 7, 8 minutes before your web browser can actually get to the login page, even after the server itself is booted. Now in our case, VMware has come up, the ESXi hypervisor, but the vCSA appliance now needs to come up. And we can actually watch that. At the bottom, power on virtual machine vCenter completed. So the auto power on sequence is working. Notice the nice names. Sweet and simple, self-evident. It's very obvious what you're looking at. If we go to the summary tab, the ESXi host, I want to look at its configuration networking. DNS, excuse me. .lab.local. So what we set up stuck, and it remained after a reboot. So that's good. How about vCenter? How does it look? Summary tab, IP address is right. Domain name is right. Host attached that it's running on is ESXi.lab.local. It doesn't say .cox.net anymore, so that worked out great. I feel highly confident this infrastructure that I built is exactly how I wanted it to be running while I head out on a plane ride very shortly and finish packing. Finishing touches. Well, the focus of the video was simplicity, and I'm going to take a look at my quick checklist to see if I checked all the important things that I do very soon after setting up my lab. So a few more minutes have gone by, and remember I said I want to create a shortcut with Chrome, and then I'll feel like I'm kind of done setting up the user interfaces, the GUIs, the server, and everything. Well, I'm getting close to that point, I think, so let's do this. If you log in without / anything, you get probably an error if the server's still coming up. Let's see. Oh, something. Proceed. There we go. Notice you don't have to remember what to type. It prompts you. You want to log in the vCSA web client? Yeah, that's what I want. Okay, so that's the URL. That's going to become important. We're going to test that we can do remote control of VMs. We're going to make sure pop-ups are allowed in Chrome. And then when we're done with all that, we're then going to pin a nice green icon right next to vSphere client. We're going to have a vSphere web client right next to it. Okay. You may remember me mentioning too, if we install a LastPass plugin, we can auto log in for that. Administrator of vSphere local. If it annoys you typing that, That can be automated, and I already have an article about that. It's time to test remote control. Now, if you have existing VMs, which I do, it'd be a good time to fire one of those up, or you can just use the vCenter one you already have there. Let's make this full screen now. And it says launch remote console. Notice what happens. Pop-up blocked, so that's a problem. Allow pop-ups. It says always allow from vCenter to lab.local, so that sounds promising, right? Now we hit this again and see what happens. Nothing. VRMC. It brings up this URL, but you don't get anything happening. Why would that be? Well, we need to download this thing. Download remote console. And I get to log in. Okay, I've logged in, and the download begins. It's very small. So we're done with that. User access control, yes. And we're now going to have a remote control window that opens a separate Windows binary. Now, if you have Windows version of VMware Workstation, or the Linux one, I suppose, VRMC, that API, that tab you saw in the Chrome browser, that would actually trigger your VMware Workstation opening if you had it installed. In my case, I don't. This is a vanilla, pristine Windows 8.1 you're seeing for the purposes of this lab setup. Okay, and it warns me it wants me to reboot. Kind of weird, right? But sure, won't take very long. I'll pause until that's done rebooting. My Windows 8.1. And the reboot is done. Let's fire up Chrome and see where we're at. Okay, that's the URL we want. Okay, so this time, launch remote console should work better. One more question. Remember this for all links of this type, and it's going to launch an application. VMware Remote Console. And another one-off question. Always trust with the certificate and connect. And there we go. Success. To get your mouse out of hostage mode, Control-Alt. Okay, let's try that again. Close it. Clean it. Close the license warning. And now when we click Launch Remote Console, it should pop right up. And it did. So success. Now it's time to pin it. So we're comfortable that Chrome's configured properly. Ready to pin it. So if we log out, it brings us right back to the vSphere login page. Here's the fun part. Click here, click More Tools, Create Application Shortcut, and then just click Create. And look what just happened. Magically, the URL bar went away. It doesn't look like a browser anymore, just like I promised you, right? Let's close that. Maybe we put VRMC to the right. So now we have vSphere Client and vSphere Web Client. How cool is that? And I don't like clutter on my desk when I can help it, so I'll get rid of that. So that's it. That piece is all good to go. Let me convince you it works. If you look at the properties of that thing, you'll see it's just a URL. And you can actually start it maximized every time if you prefer. So it just fills the window by default. So that's done. It works. It does remote control. Some of the first things you're going to do are create a new virtual machine. In my case, we could do that, or we've got existing virtual machines. But if this is the first time you've ever created your own lab, you're going to be pretty excited to do some stuff with it. But again, the other group of people that might be watching this are people who have done 5.5 before. And you don't really have to rebuild from scratch. I did not format anything other than my USB flash drive. All my local data stores are still there. So let me show you what I mean. Go to the ESXi lab.local. Let's try that again. Manage, storage. Here's all my SATA ports on my motherboard. And here's the storage, bunch of drives. It's 250 gig in size, and it shows flash drive. Okay. Now, if we head over here to the storage icon, go to storage, go to the 256 gig SSD, and go to manage. You'll see it shows the VMFS file system on there. It shows how much storage is available, how much space is available on there, what device is backing it. You get all kinds of good details. That's the OCZ Vertex. How about we just right click and say browse files? Notice what it did. It jumped to the storage manage files location. That's all it did. And we've got this Windows 10 template. Register VM when you click in the VMX file. And point to the ESXi host you want it on. Click finish. Great, now we have a VM. Same goes for another data store. I've got some stuff on there. Register VM. So my point here is, maybe you rebuilt your data center. Maybe you didn't buy the 1-year long eval experience license. If you run out of that 60 days, you haven't lost much other than the hour or two to rebuild the lab, right? And actually I talked during a lot of this video. You can do it pretty quickly. But here's the point. Now we have a little library of virtual machines already. But for more advanced users, they're getting bored at this point. I don't want to bore people. I want to now go on to the more fine-tuning chapters. I'm going to do an auto login with LastPass, and I'm going to see about the certificate warnings when you log in too that look a little ugly with Chrome. So if you want to stick around for those little more advanced home lab spit and polish techniques, great. Useful if you're already a LastPass user, or even if you're not, you could just make an account just for this one reason, and that is auto login. Okay, so it tells us, hey, install LastPass, and then here's how you configure it. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and install LastPass at this point. All I need is the LastPass Chrome extension. Okay, it shows in the tray. It's ready. So now basically after the reboot of the host is done, the server, when this comes up, and I can log back into the appliance, I'm going to be following along with this animated GIF exactly to get this to work. So I'm going to take a little break here. Okay, resume the video because I'm ready to fire up Chrome by right-clicking, bringing up a new Chrome window. There we go. Pulling that over to the left. And let's go to that vSphere client login. All right. The looping video says save all data, so I'm going to go ahead and start typing. Okay, once it's all typed in, following along on the right, here, and tools, and save all entered data. Under advanced settings, auto login, save, login. All right, the real test is for the second login. Did it really work, right? So let's see how that looks next. Log off, or log out, excuse me. Close that. Fire up a new copy of Chrome. And with any luck, it should just log in. Now, as I acknowledged in the article on the right, some circumstances you still have to reach for the mouse and hit login. It doesn't always seem to auto log in Chrome. No typing needed, right? That's the point in Home Lab. Pretty convenient. Next article. I love this article. And I haven't actually tested this since when it first came out. It's been a while. So let me try this. It's Andreas Pietz telling us how to get rid of the certificate warnings. Sounds good. And what's elegant about it is he handles all browsers. Doesn't matter. So he does it on an OS level thing, not just Firefox or Chrome. So that to me is kind of the ultimate. So how do I want to get this to work? Well, I need to suck this file out of the vCenter appliance. If I'm not a whiz at PuTTY and SCP and moving files to and from Windows, frankly, you're probably going to find it real easy to just download WinSCP. Extremely handy to have, but we don't need to install WinSCP. We can just do portable. All right, so there's a portable version, and we can make it a little more permanent by putting in something like a utility folder like I have. All we need is that file, and we can pin it to the taskbar, and now we have a handy dandy WinSCP. Okay, telling you that's not a good idea. It warns you. Okay, we double click and now we wait for it to connect. Say yes to that question. You can say never show this banner again. And a little issue there. Okay, that's better. So when SCP is downloaded, we made a shortcut to the EXE. It's not installed. There's nothing to uninstall. It's just an EXE hanging out on the hard drive. And for a good year now, it's been very slow when you first log in with timeouts, but eventually it will connect. haven't really figured out why that is, and I don't really use the tool that much. But so once we have WinSCP going, we'll be able to grab the certificate file that Andreas's article talks about. And we'll be able to do it with drag and drop mouse ease. But be very careful editing or, well, if you don't know what you're doing at all in Linux, could be a little dangerous. That is taking very long to connect. Any error showing? Nope. Ah, of course. It's the other Andreas Pete's article. This one. Remember, the shell is not enabled by default. So he then tells us, so we don't have to type shell every time we're going to putty in. Let me remind you what I'm talking about. Okay, that session is gone. If we fire a putty and we go to vCenter, you get to type that every time. Well, here's a way we don't have to. Okay, and then his article goes on to say, handy if you want to use WinSCP. So let's go back to SFTP. And in the advanced settings of the connection, enter that as the SFTP server. Save it and test it. We're in. Nice. Thank you, Andreas. Awesome articles. Next, go up to the root and let's navigate our way to the other article, which tells us here it is for vCenter appliance. The file is right there. So var lib VMware vMCA root.certificate. Do we want to put it in documents? I suppose. So now we dragged and dropped from right to left. Got the file. Following along, go ahead and log out of here. Close it. And he tells us what to do. Right click and install. Okay, so we're going to go to Documents. Right click. Install certificate. Select local machine. Say yes for user access control. Import was successful. So now we fire up our extra copy of Chrome. We go here. It worked. It didn't pop up saying this is a non-authentic site. In fact, I didn't even have to hit enter for the login. It just completely automated the login. Alright, so I was wrong in that you still have certificate warnings, but you don't have the nasty thing you have to click on in Chrome. Close all browser sessions. So here we go. We're going to try my vSphere web client and see how smoothly it launches. Okay, it launches maximized and types everything in for me. Didn't actually automatically hit enter for me, but okay, on that particular go around. No nasty Chrome bypassed invalid certificate messages. So I would say that was pretty slick. Completely successful. I met all the objectives and had some fun and got Windows configured exactly the way I like. This is the first time actually from beginning to end I've done this whole process, and I did it many rehearsals, different showstopper problems. Feels good to finally have it done. Hey, it's now 2 weeks later after recording the 3 hours of raw video that I just sifted through this weekend. I spent hours editing this video, and I took it so seriously. I actually shipped a 2560 by 1440 monitor to here in my hotel room so I could get this done, because I'm so stoked about sending this video out to the world. And the reasons are, it's just the tip of the iceberg as far as projects. For instance, if you just got through this video, well, here you'll see I have a bunch of VMs, some old, some new. I still have another dozen VMs that are out there. I just haven't re-added to inventory. But basically, I'm already having fun, right? You've got Windows 10 10074. I was able to effectively use that right from here in my hotel room and test things out like the new browser. What's another extremely useful thing that's happened? Well, enabling AHCI and Realtek. Very common for your drives to disappear when you get to ESXi 6.0, or even 5.5 for that matter. And it's pretty easy to reinstall those drivers, so I'm going to have a video covering that. How about automatically shutting down your data center gracefully? So we have this super guide about UPSs, and if you scroll, the article that you would want would be, if you're running a virtualization lab that you just set up, how to shut it all down gracefully. So if you get one of these batteries, you're going to have pretty easy time of setting up a USB connection to a VM that's left running. It's called an appliance, the CyberPower appliance, and it automatically just gracefully shuts down all my VMs and then the ESXi host, just like it did dutifully for me while I was 2,000 miles away and a thunderstorm hit my home. Here's VM endpoint backup. I've got machines backing up over a Machi VPN that's running in this Windows tunnel that's left running, and they're going to a file share that I leave running. I also have a Windows Server 2012 R2 Essentials that can do backups as well, which I've covered from time to time on my site. And another project you might consider in the future would be something like OpenVPN. That allows me to securely use the cable modem in my home with a wired connection going with something called VTD, or pass-through, right to a VM called OpenVPN Server. That's a Linux appliance, which was actually fairly straightforward to configure for VPN while I'm on the road with my mobile or laptop devices. So again, just a vast array of projects. Finally, because a lot of folks use ad blockers these days, if you're trying to support a site like this, well, you've got the buttons right there near the end of the video that give you some suggestions, like a tip jar. Here's another one. This article about Amazon affiliate link, you can actually just click on Amazon before you buy here. Hopefully you found this video helpful, and hopefully you like the idea of me continuing to make free content like this, which is challenging and time consuming. I quite enjoy the lab time. I can't say I enjoy the work of editing the video, something as long as this and ambitious as this. So please do leave your comments open, honest. I really appreciate them. I appreciate them so much that they're right here on the front of my website, and they tend to be really helpful to me to know what people are thinking as they're reading my articles and where I could do better. So thank you. I hope you're excited about creating your home lab.